Our next speaker, talking about introverts and extroverts, Kianosh, Pourian.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kianosh Pourian. I'd like to thank Fresh Still Soil for putting this together. And I'm going to talk today about introverts and extroverts. I lie somewhere in the middle of an introvert and extrovert, which means I get very nervous giving presentations, but I force myself to do it. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll see that that is a very wrong statement to put on introverts, extroverts, and what goes in between. So, who are you? No one of consequence. But if you say, I must know, then I'll tell you, you get used to disappointment. And if somebody can tell me what that quote is from, you get a gold star. Beautiful people, I like you already. I am a user interface developer and a contractor, independent contractor. I've worked for companies like Staples, Molecular, MIT, on and on. Most of these that you see in the list are contracting projects. My tenure has been at Staples, which I worked for 8 years. And that was back in 2008 where I finished it up. It was at Staples that there were some days that I would go in, or sometimes during the day, that as Carl put it, I became an asshole. I was that guy that nobody wanted to be around. Didn't know what was the cause of it, had no idea. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I read an article on Fast Company that talked about introverts. And as I'm going down that article and listing paragraph by paragraph, the light bulb comes on and it's getting brighter and brighter. And I see, oh my God, they're describing me. So it became somewhat of a passion for me to find out more about this introvert, extrovert, and what makes people be one or the other. So there are some misconceptions. And with any misconception, there are some falsities to them. I'd like to read you a quote that I'm going to read verbatim because I think it's very beautiful and very on point. The problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. So when you label somebody an introvert or an extrovert, you're just telling part of that story. Carl Jung was the psychologist that coined the term introvert and extrovert. Actually, it was extrovert in the 20th century. But unfortunately, ever since then, we have mislabeled people. Nobody really wants to be labeled an introvert because an introvert is known as shy, antisocial, or stuck up. On the other spectrum of it, an extrovert is known as obnoxious, needy, and bullies. Neither one of those are true. According to Carl Jung, there are no pure introverts and extroverts. If there is one, they're in an insane asylum. So what are we if we are not pure introverts or extroverts? Most of the things that you see out on the internet concentrates more about introverts because everybody really wants to become an extrovert. Who doesn't want to be that likable guy that is the star of the show in the party and everybody's laughing at and telling all the jokes. This was a good chart that was made by both an extrovert and introvert. And you'll see there's a pattern, as we talk about introverts and extroverts, there's a pattern going on. And that pattern is that introverts are not shy. They can be equally social people. As opposed to also to extroverts, they are not always the life of the party. They can be introspective people also. When it comes to people, introverts, it can be draining for them to interact. And well, I'm going to talk about this quite a bit more because that's a key element of the interaction that happens between introverts and extroverts. As opposed to extroverts, when they interact with people, is very energizing. Conversations, introverts sit back and listen, versus extroverts like to start conversation and initiate them. Talking with strangers, silence, thoughts, everything you'll see, it has a pattern of introspection versus extrospection. My favorite is the punctuations, where introverts are comma and extroverts are exclamation point. So there's a lot of times, a lot of people mistake shyness and introvert. And it's very easy to make that mistake. You're in a meeting. People are talking. But there are people who sit back and don't say anything. You can either label them as shy or label them as an introvert. There's a key difference. A shy person gets nervous about getting engaged, and therefore they stay quiet. An introverted person thinks and is introspective before they talk. And as a result, they also become quiet. There's been plenty of meetings that I've been in. At the end of the meeting, anybody have any questions? I have nothing to say. But I do go to that person, maybe 30 minutes later, maybe a day later, and I hand them a dissertation of what I thought. Because I had time to think about it. The other key thing is also that introverted people are great one-on-one versus extroverted people like the crowd. Source of energy. Now this I don't have a meme for this, but this reminds me of Morpheus showing Neo a battery. And if you think about yourself as a battery in this term, well, it sort of makes sense. Where the extrovert is a rechargeable battery that as they are interacting with people, they get recharged. As opposed to an introvert, as they are interacting with people, they are draining their battery. So there is that time they need that solitude, sorry. They need that solitude. How many times have you had a conversation with a friend to say, hey, let's go out this Friday? No, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go home and stay. No, come on, it'll be fun. What are you gonna do? Stay home, do nothing? Yeah, I'm gonna go home, stay, do nothing. And actually, for an introvert, that is party time to recharge your battery. It is something they want to do, and it's something they like. My best day of the week is Sunday, where I sit for 6 hours in front of a TV and watch football. My two daughters don't let me get very far with that, but I try. My wife doesn't like it much either. So you may ask yourself, what are you? What am I? Am I an introvert? Am I an extrovert? Most people fall in between where it's called an ambivert. Now you may lean on one side or the other, but most likely you're an ambivert. There are tests you can take out there. There's a Myers-Briggs type test you can take that will let you know. But most likely you yourself will know. You'll know when your battery needs recharging. You'll know when you want to go to that party or when you don't want to go to that party. And you know what type you are. This is part of my family. The one you see on the right is my wife, the little girl, Magdalene, my daughter. And the other two are my in-laws, Mary and David. David is a very tall man. I look up to him figuratively and literally every day. Mary, on the other hand, is 5'4". I love her very much, and I do not look down to her at all.
Where is that?
That is in Bangor, Maine. That's a Lucerne Lake. It's the mountain we hiked up on is Bald Eagle Mountain. I have another daughter, a 3-year-old, which I didn't even think twice not bringing her hiking up a mountain. So the story about my in-laws is that my mother-in-law is extreme, I shouldn't say extreme, but she's an extrovert, versus my father-in-law is an introvert. Him and I get along very, very well because we sit, when I go to his house, we sit in a corner, he's doing his puzzles, I'm tweeting, I'm doing something, and we get along famously. Occasionally we get up to refresh our bourbon, but then we're fine. On the other hand, my mother-in-law does not like lulls in conversation, which is fine. We talk, she asks me all sorts of questions. What are you working on? I work in technology. I don't know how much I can tell her that she will understand, but I tell her. The reason I brought this up is because what we don't want to do is change an introvert into an extrovert or vice versa. That shouldn't be our goal at all. I know we live in a society that cherishes the likable person, but there's nothing wrong with being that introvert. There's nothing, introverts can do everything an extrovert can do, they just need that special time. My father-in-law being an introvert, one of the brilliant things that my mother-in-law did is did not try to change him, but occasionally pushed him in the right direction to socialize with people as time needed. As a result of that, he moved from a simple engineer to a vice president of a company. You need a level of socialization in order to do that. But she did not try to change him. She did not force him into doing things he did not want to do. His Saturdays, he does wake up and he has to have his egg and sausage, and on Sundays, he has to have his oatmeal in the morning. She did not try to change that. So that's one of the things that I think is key. On the other hand, in my younger days, I saw the likable guy out there and I wanted to be that. And I forced myself to come out of my shell and be that. And as a result of that, I became this obnoxious person that said things without thinking. And I came out of my element. I was no longer an introvert that took time to say things. I just said things, tried to be funny at a party, and that did not work. It took me a while to realize that that's not what you do. So how do you care for an introvert? You'll see that as you read every single one of these, the pattern there is the one-on-one and sort of giving introverts their space. Respect their privacy, give them 15-minute warnings, reprimand them privately, give them time when they need time. So I work at this project right now that we have these cubicles that are very low so you can see the person across from you sitting. And I have this cube mate, whatever you want to call it, that it loves to talk. I try sending signals out there by putting my headphones on, but even then she still tries to talk to me, even though my headphones are on. So one of the things that I went to establish was office hours. I sent out an email saying that because I need time to do development work, I'm going to set some office hours, which is from 1 to 3 every day. You have my full attention during those hours. Otherwise, please let me be. I got different reactions from, who do you think you are? To, hey, that's not a bad idea, to one of my friends, which is a Russian lady, she wrote in an email that I should come down from the top horse, which I read a couple of times means get off your high horse. So after I explained to them why I needed what I needed, pretty much everybody understood. We do need that solace time to sort of gather our energy and not go to every single meeting, every single interaction. On the other hand, an extrovert does enjoy that. Extroverts are great at brainstorming because they love to dive right in. They love to be in meetings, they love to talk in meetings. So these are the simple characteristics between an introvert and extrovert. Now, how do you interact? How do you put these people in the same room? I'm pretty sure you guys, all of you guys know somebody who's an introvert or an extrovert, or you know what you are. How do you interact with somebody? How do you interact with that extrovert who is standing in the hallway, not only talking to you, but talking to every single person that passes by? Versus the guy who is in his cubicle, or the girl, that's in his cubicle with the headphone on and would like not to be bothered. How do we deal with that? Communication is key, right? So, like I said, I communicate at office hours. I communicate with headphones. Those are things that I would like people to know to be left alone. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So as a result, I think managers and supervisors are key in this, where they kind of decide how to make use of a person's time. I've worked in plenty of companies, different sizes. My favorite was a very small startup where we came in the morning at 9 a.m. We had all of our meetings within the first 30 minutes. We had our scrum, we had our chats, we were done. The rest of the day was mine. As opposed to when I worked at Staples, I was invited to every single meeting. And I went to every single meeting wondering, what am I doing here? So by the end of the day, I was the asshole. Looking for signs is also, like I said, office hours, a little whiteboard outside that says keep out. There's nothing wrong with that. Things like that. Now, here's learning to adapt to others is also key. Once you see the signs of what an extrovert and an introvert is, you can once you understand that, then you can say, oh yeah, okay. He doesn't want to go to our social gathering today. I'm cool with that. Or he doesn't want to be bothered right now. It's all fine. So once we understand those and once we learn to adapt to each other, then the flow happens. On the other hand, also, me as an introvert will also have to adapt a little bit. If I work in a community, if I work in an office space where everybody's facing each other, then I'm going to have to learn to adapt. One of the ways I've learned to adapt is occasionally to ask my boss to work from home. And that's a misconception some people have of working from home. For a lot of people, working from home is not just productivity, but also it's a day of recharging and helps out tremendously. Last but not least, I know this may contradict the previous point, and sorry for using Billy Joel's lyrics, don't go changing to try to please me, but you shouldn't try to go against your nature. Don't try to become an extrovert when you are an introvert, or vice versa. That's quicker than I thought, but thanks.
Questions?
Sure. As a UX professional and as an introvert, how do you overcome that introversion and do a good job with field research and engaging with actual users, field observation, that sort of thing. How do you?
So what's your stumbling block, though?
The conversations involved in the observation process, right?
Is it a certain time you don't want to do the conversations, or is it just in general you're not fond of conversations?
I think once it gets rolling, it's okay.
Right.
It's sort of the difficulty I've had is really kind of going in with that framework that says, okay, here's how I overcome myself to get this going and successful. So I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions, techniques, things that you've seen work well for introverts doing that.
Right. The way I've done it is, for me, more one-on-one conversations were a lot easier than having people look at me or have an audience, right? In high school, I hated asking girls out because they were never alone. They were always with somebody else. So, I never got the one-on-one. I had 6 other eyes watching me while I'm asking a girl out. So it was not the only reason I didn't go. So the one-on-one part, and what you kind of figure out what's easier for you, right? There are certain times, maybe certain times of the day, you don't feel like talking to anybody. That may be it. But once you start figuring out your daily routine and what's easier for you during that day, you can kind of grasp that. One book I recommend, and I forgot to put it up here, but I put some of the material that I use for this presentation, but one book that I recommend is called Quiet. And I've read that book. It's very good, and it kind of gives you an insight on, a much better insight on what an introvert is than I do, and it helps out quite a bit in that area. I'll tweet that out to let people know.
Yeah, I'm struck by the sequence of the last speaker and what you're talking about here. And it makes me wonder whether some of the techniques that the previous speaker was talking about are a better fit for, yes, I know you're saying, I just can't remember your name.
No, a lot of things that Carl said.
Whether they're better suited to a team of extroverts or whether they actually could work for a range of styles.
And in fairness, I was thinking the same thing.
Right. Well, I don't know if you can ever have a team of extroverts, or you would want to ever have a team of extroverts, right?
Carl, when you think about your team or the team that you've sort of let run your company, I think it's just amazing you've done that, by the way. Under no circumstances would you ever catch me doing that. But were they mostly at one end of the spectrum or the other?
Yeah, I'll say they're mixed. One of the problems was I'm obviously an extrovert, right? And I kept trying to change things when they were okay. And that was part of the reason why I had to go. I mean, really, the company is better because I'm not there, because of my nature, right? I was pulling people into those conversations publicly that didn't want to have them.
Right.
So I think it's got to be a mix, and it is a mix right now.
That ambient transparency element
Yeah,
feels very uncomfortable to the
Well,
introvert part of it.
I don't think it made them uncomfortable as long as they didn't have to participate. They
Right.
wanted to know what was going on.
Right.
And I just want to say thanks because I learned a tremendous amount just now. And never show this to my team.
Well, there's that misconception that, I'm sorry, but there's that misconception that designers, I thought, for example, designers are extroverts while developers are introverts. And that's not the case. I mean, there's a good mixture of everybody in all those fields. So, but that's why we can categorize that. And before setting up on this, that's what I thought. I thought, I don't get along with that designer because I'm an introvert and he's an extrovert, right? But it wasn't the case. I just don't like designers. Just kidding.
So I lean more towards the introversion, being an introvert. And I work with some very extroverted people. And I find there are often times when I'm in meetings and I do have something I want to share and I want to say. And I can't I can't talk loud enough. I can't actually interject into a conversation. So I often find, and I have literally slammed the table to get attention, and I don't necessarily always like that. But it is a frustration in that, extroverts are very strong personalities, and they can take over meetings. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? And how do you, as an introvert, really begin to interject so that you can have meaningful conversations?
Well, personally, in my opinion, a lot of meetings have been ran incorrectly. So that's part of the problem, which I don't know if I can solve. But to me, there's nothing wrong with sending an email out later of here's my thoughts, right? Actually, that works better for me because now I've managed to gather my thoughts. But instead of trying to, and that's part of like trying to interject into an extrovert's world or conversation, you kind of go out of your element in order to sort of trying to fit in there or get your word across, where it's perfectly fine to do it later. To me, a lot of meetings, a lot of conferences that I've learned a lot during it, but a lot afterwards also. And 9 out of 10 at Staples, I hate to use Staples, but at Staples, we did a lot more better productive work outside of a meeting than in that hour meeting that we were in there. So there's nothing wrong with waiting for afterwards. No need to slam. Just let them do their thing, and you can put your 2 cents after.
One strategy, just maybe that might help with that, is I've told some of my team, don't show up to meetings if there's not an agenda. And I don't, because it's just more time sitting in a meeting, you not really know what we're going to be talking about. But it's helped a lot of the more introverted people at my company to just, if there is that rigid agenda, you can say, hey, before we move on, I have a point on this piece, or maybe try that strategy. Or make your own agenda. If there's a meeting without an agenda, send one out ahead of time.
I can have a whole new discussion about meetings and how to cover that. Yeah, we should have a meeting about that.
I'd like to follow up on these last 2 comments and questions from the viewpoint of someone who's running a meeting. I do a lot of facilitation of workshops. Do you have any suggestions on how to create an atmosphere where everybody feels comfortable saying something and it's not dominated by the extroverts who jump right in?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you can make somebody who doesn't want to talk comfortable enough to talk. I don't know if forcing it is right or going around the room. I never liked the going around the room thing in meetings. I don't mind introducing myself, but I didn't like going around the room and getting opinions.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't do that,
right.
But I just wondered if there was any.
No, I mean, I would, at the end of each meeting, I would suggest, please, if you have any other comments, please let me know. And I encourage it because, like I said, a lot of times, after going away from a meeting, I thought about it and I was like, oh, I should have said this. I'm the guy that should have came up with a comeback, but only thinks about it 30 minutes later, right? So I'm much better with later on thought processes than immediately.
We had one.
Hi, I was just wondering, you mentioned tweeting, and it made me think, from an introvert perspective, is a social interaction way, like to get out there and it's behind sort of these social media and email, and you mentioned message threads, and I'm just wondering if that could be like an effective way to, I don't know, the message thread thing stuck with me, and I'm wondering, is that an effective way for an introvert to communicate their thoughts?
Definitely.
In a way that's not as, I have to be out there and.
Definitely, but there's also the extroverts that get in there also, and those are, I don't know if you've had anybody troll you, but, so, yeah.
I just have a couple of observations on helping introverts out.
Okay.
One of them is in brainstorms, which is usually one of the places that introverts feel very under pressure. One thing is to try out the Pomodoro technique, to actually take breaks. So run for 20 minutes and take a 5-minute not doing the thing break. And that usually gives people a little bit of time to process and come back. And if you open with the introverts after the breaks, that can sometimes be a good thing to just break it up a little. And the second one we've been doing is trying not to do monolithic meetings, which are trying to address a problem, think about it, come up with actions, and come out the other end with like everybody's done and dusted, because again, you're missing that cooling off period where people come up with some more ideas and some more comes out. So we'll quite often try and do it so that there's a kind of a get the shape of the thing in the morning meeting, and then there's more of a come to conclusions and decide what we're going to do meeting in the afternoon. So try not to do them in one lump.
Yep. I'll tell you what brainstorming scares me, right? I'm getting in front and I'm about to give you my ideas, and about 5 other people are going to tell me I'm wrong, where I'm more comfortable if you came to me and say, no, that doesn't work for me, right? So those are some of the things that I don't know if you can have brainstorming outside of everybody else, if that brainstorming works, but to me, it's more comfortable one-on-one criticism versus you're criticizing me and 50 other people are watching, you criticize me. That's what's not comfortable. So that's why it's hard for a lot of introverts to get up and say, here's my idea. And everybody go, you know.
I don't even think extroverts like being criticized publicly in front of the group.
I don't think they mind it as much though. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not an extrovert, so. I agree, nobody really likes being criticized, but I think they're more comfortable with it. They might be.
Here, maybe?
Maybe.
Here, I'll just take ownership of it. That we can take it, but we're just the humans like everyone else.
Sure, I agree.
So one of the things that some people start to do when they first learn about personality types is they kind of misuse them in trying to force other people to fit to their personality type.
Yep.
So the question is, how do you strike that holistic balance between the individual and the group, and honoring the individual differences but not catering to them? Because that, how do you strike that holistic balance in managing a team?
I wish I had the answer for that. That would be the $64,000 answer, right? I don't know I don't think I know about introverts and extroverts, but I don't think I'm qualified to answer that at all. Sorry.
I think it's fundamentally asking people to maintain respect for each other. That's all it really comes down to. If you're able to manage a meeting or an environment where that is adhered to or enforced respect, that works well with our space.
Right.
Sometimes, occasionally, there's been extroverts that have really pushed forward and to the exclusion of some of the introverts. And it sometimes takes someone to stand up and say, hey, if you make it very overt, very obvious that there's a number of extroverts here that are really running the show, running this meeting, we need to hear from everyone, or we need to get some pause for people to collect their thoughts. And that just signal respect makes a difference.
I probably tend towards the introvert side of things. And things that I've learned to do, the jobs that I've had the most success in is when I kind of am paired with an extrovert, where we could talk ahead of time. And so they get a sense of where I'm coming from. Sometimes they get to take the meeting themselves and I get to go do what I need to do. But sometimes, even when I'm in a meeting, and it's never been a formal alliance even, but somehow the conversation is going on and they'll pull me in on it or however on it. And it's really learning to work with other people so that they recognize the role that you contribute on the different things.
Right.
And in terms of conversations, a lot of times I know that I come across very directly. When I'm trying to analyze a problem, I can be offensive. And so what I will do is I will say to people, I'm not trying to be offensive. I really just have to go through a very strict step-by-step to understand what you're talking about. So I explain my style to people to be, to make it less offensive to them. So, but I've been sitting, this presentation and the previous one, I've just been sitting here, and I was like, each time I just feel a little knot untie, and it's like, oh, somebody understands what this is all about.
Well, that pairing of an introvert and an extrovert is rather interesting because so you get the one-on-one interaction and everything, but then you also get to use your extrovert partner as a microphone for things you want to say.
Not
So
just
that
a
I thought,
microphone, but also they will actually help me in a meeting to pull me out so that I can participate in the meeting.
right. So yeah, that's interesting.
We have time for one more, and I think it was over here.
To me?
Yes.
I don't think I need a microphone.
Maybe for recording.
For recording, you don't want me to. Thanks for the talk.
Oh, sure.
Can you speak a little bit about how having a better understanding of the needs of people at different points along the introvert to extrovert spectrum has influenced your UX work? Because a big part of UX is understanding users, and having that understanding that people have different needs seems like it might influence it, particularly in a non-digital sense.
Right. So empathy for others is something I think we all are striving to learn, and we continuously try to learn. So how does it affect my UX work? It hasn't as much as I thought it would. It's to me it hasn't affected my work. It affects mostly my interaction with other people. Now, I'm not entirely in the UX. I'm more of a UI developer, so I don't do A/B testing, or I don't interview very many people. I'm the guy who's coding away. So in that sense, it hasn't. I don't think I have a good answer for you because I use it for my interaction with others, not interaction in the work that I do. So, sure.
Well, I think that's all we have before lunch starts. I'm super hungry.
Yeah.
But we want to thank
Thank you.